This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's military's continued its massive bombing campaign of Syrian military targets with some 480 strikes in just the past 48 hours. Israeli Defense Chief Israel Katz said his forces had destroyed 15 naval vessels, anti-aircraft batteries and weapons factories, and were working to create a so-called sterile zone in southern Syria.
Together with the Prime Minister, I instructed the IDF to establish a sterile defense zone against weapons and terror threats in southern Syria in order to prevent the establishment and organization of terror in Syria and to prevent creating a situation that would be similar to what existed in Lebanon and Gaza before October 7th. We will not allow this. We will not allow threats against the state of Israel.
On Tuesday, Syria's ambassador to the United Nations called on the Security Council to act decisively to end the bombings, which he said targeted civilian and military infrastructure. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, condemned Israel's assault.
We are continuing to see Israeli movements and bombardments into Syrian territory. This needs to stop. This is extremely important.
The UN envoy said the United Nations would consider removing the Syrian armed group HTS from a list of designated terrorist organizations, but only if it supports a government that's inclusive of all communities. On Tuesday, Syria's new caretaker prime minister, Mohammed al-Bashir, met with members of Syria's transitional government, pledging to bring back millions of refugees who fled Syria's 13-year civil war and to keep Syria's public services and institutions running after the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, human rights groups have confirmed the killing of one of Syria's most prominent opposition activists. The body of Mazen al-Hamada was discovered inside the notorious Sednaya prison near Damascus, alongside about 40 others in the prison morgue who also showed signs of torture. Israel's continued its relentless attacks across northern and central Gaza, killing dozens of people, including women and children, in the last day. Earlier today, Israeli forces bombed a residential building in Beit Lahia, where displaced families were taking shelter, killing at least 20 people. At least 7 Palestinians, all members of the same family, were killed in a separate Israeli attack on a house in the Nuseirat camp. People who lost loved ones were seen sitting and crying amidst the destruction, with some victims still trapped under the rubble. This is one of the survivors, Issam al-Hosari.
We were sleeping. We didn't hear the sound of the missile at all. Suddenly, I found myself waking up like this, and I saw the rubble all over me and the children. I found myself trying to remove the rubble and pull out the children, and they were suffocating. I got out of the tent, and as I stepped outside, I saw the people. Bodies everywhere, blood and limbs scattered among the trees.
This all comes as Palestinian health authorities warn dozens of wounded patients receiving care at the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza are at risk of dying due to lack of water and food. Israel's former defense minister Yoav Gallant has met with President Biden's special envoy for the Middle East and North Africa, Brett McGurk, at the White House. Their meeting Tuesday came just weeks after the International Criminal Court in The Hague issued an arrest warrant for Gallant for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Gaza. On Monday evening, the prominent Adas Israel Synagogue in Washington, D.C. canceled a planned event featuring Yoav Gallant amidst protests. Meanwhile, Republican leaders have selected Brian Mast to lead the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Mast had previously compared Palestinians to Nazis, has said Palestinian civilians are not innocent, and called on Israel to destroy more infrastructure in Gaza. In Sudan, at least 127 people have been killed over the past 2 days as fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces grows more bloody, with the warring sides launching attacks across North Darfur. The army has also intensified airstrikes on regions controlled by the RSF. Meanwhile, RSF fighters have conducted deadly raids on villages, with both sides heavily targeting civilian communities. This is the governor of Khartoum.
This attack, instead of being directed at our heroes on the front lines, is targeted at these innocent civilians in their everyday lives, whether on public transportation or in markets. This is an attack on the people, while wars should be fought on battlefields and with regular forces.
The 20-month war has displaced some 11 million people from their homes and unleashed the world's largest hunger crisis. South Korean police have raided the offices of President Yoon Suk-yeol after his short-lived declaration of martial law last week. The police investigation comes as Yoon has been barred from exiting South Korea while he remains under investigation for committing treason. Separately, South Korea's top prison officials said the disgraced former defense minister Kim Young-hyun attempted to end his own life while in custody. Kim was jailed on Sunday after he allegedly recommended imposing martial law. A federal judge in Maryland has suspended a lawsuit against President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Education, which Trump has pledged to shut down. Linda McMahon, a former executive with World Wrestling Entertainment, faces allegations that she and her husband, Vince McMahon, failed to stop a ringside announcer from sexually assaulting young boys in the 1980s and 90s. In more transition news, Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas said this week he's inclined to vote to confirm Trump's pick to head the FBI, Kash Patel. Patel is a Trump loyalist who's embraced QAnon conspiracy theories, supported the January 6th insurrection, and has called for the FBI's D.C. office to be closed. Meanwhile, a new report by the Justice Department's Inspector General finds the former Trump administration's Department of Justice secretly obtained phone and text message logs of 43 congressional staffers and 2 members of Congress in 2017 and 18 as prosecutors investigated public leaks of classified government information to the press. Kash Patel was among congressional staffers whose records were seized. The report also found the Trump Justice Department violated its own policies in how it subpoenaed phone and text records from journalists. In climate news, European Union scientists report average global temperatures over the past 16 months have exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, marking a grim new milestone in the climate crisis. Last month was the second warmest November ever recorded, with 2024 likely to become the hottest year on record. Here in New York, dozens of climate activists on Tuesday kicked off 3 days of peaceful actions at the state capitol in Albany as they continued to demand New York Governor Kathy Hochul sign legislation to combat the climate crisis. The bill, named the Climate Change Superfund Act, would require large fossil fuel companies to pay $75 billion over 25 years for climate damage repair, resilience, and protection programs. This is one of the activists who participated in a sit-in yesterday.
We're heading into a presidential administration that will do everything in their power to roll back any progress that we've made on climate and continue America's track of being the biggest expander of fossil fuels in the world. Shame! This is why, more than ever, we need state leadership. But these final weeks are an opportunity for our governor to make a commitment to our generation, to establish a new model for how we deal with climate disasters that makes polluters pay and not taxpayers.
House progressives have called on President Joe Biden to commute the death sentences of the 40 federal prisoners on death row and to resentence them to a prison term. On Tuesday, Congress members Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, and Adriano Espaillat were joined by death penalty abolitionists on Capitol Hill, where they called on Biden to act before Trump takes office 40 days from now. Congressmember Pressley noted that during his first term, President Trump went on an unprecedented execution spree, ordering the deaths of 13 people in a matter of months, more federal executions than in the prior 70 years combined.
State-sanctioned murder is not justice. And the death penalty is a cruel, racist, and fundamentally flawed punishment that has no place in our society. It is deeply discriminatory and has disproportionately been weaponized against black, brown, and low-income families for far too long. It is long past time for President Biden to make good on his campaign promise to address the federal death penalty.
A federal judge has blocked grocery chain Kroger's $25 billion merger with Albertsons, siding with the Federal Trade Commission, which called the deal anti-competitive. The FTC had argued the proposed merger to create the largest supermarket chain in the U.S. with some 5,000 stores would give customers already grappling with food costs fewer options for groceries. In related news, President-elect Trump on Tuesday named Andrew Ferguson to lead the Federal Trade Commission. Ferguson is a Republican former congressional aide and former Supreme Court clerk who's pledged to roll back federal oversight of most large U.S. corporations. And in Oslo, Norway, anti-nuclear activists who survived the U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have accepted the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize for efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. Terumi Tanaka, who delivered the acceptance speech on behalf of the grassroots Japanese anti-nuclear group Nihon Hadankyo, warned that nuclear powers, including Russia and Israel, are threatening to break a long-standing taboo against the use of nuclear weapons.
Our movement has undoubtedly played a major role in creating the nuclear taboo. However, there still remains 12,000 nuclear warheads on Earth today, 4,000 of which are operationally deployed, ready for immediate launch. The nuclear superpower, Russia, threatens to use nuclear weapons in its war against Ukraine, and a cabinet member of Israel, in the midst of its unrelenting attacks on Gaza in Palestine, even spoke of the possible use of nuclear arms. In addition to the civilian casualties, I am infinitely saddened and angered that the nuclear taboo threatens to be broken.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.